Happy Wednesday, everyone, and thank you for joining me for episode 35 of the Southern Conservative Podcast. My name is Ty. A reminder, there will not be a podcast tomorrow. If you haven't already followed my Facebook page at facebook.com/southernconservative, please do so. And stay tuned for updates on whether there will be a makeup podcast on Friday. There was breaking news in the early morning hours today in Austin, Texas. The serial bomber in that city has died. Law enforcement was able to trace him to a motel. After spotting police, the 24-year-old male suspect fled the motel and was chased and later crashed his vehicle. After police began shooting at the suspect, he detonated 2 explosives in his vehicle. He either died from the gunshots or the explosion. The medical examiner has not yet identified the individual. Police are warning folks there may still be bombs out there in the system, and to notify law enforcement if they find any suspicious package. Yesterday, there was a school shooting in my home state of Maryland. The shooting occurred Tuesday morning at Great Mills High School in St. Mary's County, Maryland. The shooter has been identified as 17-year-old Austin Wyatt Rollins. 2 students were shot by Rollins, a 16-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy. School Resource Officer Deputy Blaine Gaskill engaged Rollins and fired 1 round at him, and Rollins fired 1 shot back at the deputy. It is still undetermined whether Rollins was killed by the officer or whether he committed suicide. Either way, the officer engaged the shooter, which was the correct thing to do, especially in light of what happened last month in Parkland, Florida, where the officer at the school remained outside during the shooting. What should be pointed out here is that even if the deputy did not kill the shooter, he certainly stopped the shooter from causing more carnage. There could have been more victims in this incident had the officer not responded the way he did. So you clearly see how a good guy with a gun was able to stop a bad guy with a gun. And this happened in Maryland, a state with very strict gun laws. Now, the sheriff's department feels Rollins may have killed himself, meaning he carried out his attack using a handgun. But remember, this kid is 17 years old. A 17-year-old cannot purchase a handgun. And again, Maryland already has tough gun control laws. So, to all the gun control folks out there, what other legislation would you write that would have prevented this shooting? You see, legislation and more gun control is not the answer. Part of the answer lies in the actions taken by the deputy. He went after the shooter and engaged the shooter. That was the right thing to do. The fact that there was an officer at the school in the first place certainly proved effective. St. Mary's County Sheriff Tim Cameron said the whole episode played out in about a minute. So having the deputy on site was crucial here. It would have taken more than just a minute for outside law enforcement to show up at the school. By then, the shooter probably would have already shot more students. Another effective tool, and I don't know if this is in place at this school, is enhanced security at entrances. Having people search backpacks, having metal detectors at entrances, checking IDs, well, that wouldn't have stopped this kid because he went to school there. But certainly checking IDs so you can tell if someone from outside the school is showing up, or if you have someone who has been banned from the school is showing up at the door. These things are key so people are not able to bring guns into the school building. Having officers in place that can respond to a shooting once it happens is good, but even better is preventing the shooting from happening in the first place. Enhanced security can make this possible. I want to remind everyone to please check out my Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/southernconservative. That's facebook.com/southernconservative. There you will find links to conservative news articles on stories you may not hear about in the mainstream media. Plus, if you follow the news feed, you'll find links to the daily podcasts. Be sure to also subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll be alerted when a new podcast has been posted. New podcasts are posted daily, Monday through Thursday. I want to follow up on the discussion from yesterday about Andrew McCabe and other players from the DOJ and FBI that are involved in all sorts of different corruption scandals. You have the Hillary Clinton email investigation. James Comey was the FBI director at the time. Andrew McCabe was the deputy director. Comey exonerated Hillary Clinton on July 5, 2016, just 3 days after the FBI interviewed Clinton. Comey actually began crafting his exoneration statement months prior to that with the help of others, including Peter Strzok. Strzok was head of counterintelligence at the FBI. Text messages reveal he was practically in constant communication with his mistress, Lisa Page. We know from these text messages that Strzok and Page were aware that then Attorney General Loretta Lynch knew Hillary was not going to be prosecuted. She issued a statement several days prior to Comey's announcement that she would accept whatever recommendation Comey was going to make. Well, she knew all along Comey wasn't going to recommend the prosecution. The case was reopened in late October 2016 after emails were discovered on Anthony Weiner's laptop that contained messages exchanged between Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton. However, it turns out that McCabe knew these emails existed a month before the investigation was reopened. McCabe tried to prevent the FBI from reopening the case prior to the 2016 election, but he was unable to do so. McCabe had to recuse himself shortly thereafter, after it was discovered his wife had received money from groups tied to Terry McAuliffe, who was a close friend of Hillary Clinton. Then you have the Trump-Russia investigation that the FBI started. Strzok was crucial in starting the investigation. Strzok and Page were in communication with Andrew McCabe over some sort of insurance policy designed to prevent Trump from being elected and then to take down his presidency should he be elected. While the details of this are still not publicly known, some believe it has to deal with the dossier, which is another scandal in and of itself. Comey was also head of the FBI during this time. The investigation into Trump-Russia collusion began when the FBI was alerted to a conversation George Papadopoulos had with Australian ambassador to the UK, Alexander Downer, in which Papadopoulos told Downer he had learned that Russia had Clinton's emails. Papadopoulos learned this information from a professor in London. We know that Downer helped to secure a $25 million donation from the Russian government to the Clinton Foundation. The investigation really heated up after the FBI was informed of a dossier written by Christopher Steele. Steele was an FBI informant who was being paid by Fusion GPS to conduct opposition research on Donald Trump. Fusion GPS received their money from the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign that was being funneled through the law firm Perkins Coie. The 35-page dossier produced by Steele is full of Russian lies and propaganda. The information in the dossier was never independently verified by the FBI. But because the FBI deemed Steele to be a credible source at the time he wrote the dossier, the FBI deemed the dossier to also be credible and relied on the dossier to obtain 4 FISA warrants against Carter Page. According to the memo released by Devin Nunes early last month, we know that FBI Director James Comey signed off on 3 FISA applications, and FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe signed off on 1 application. Over at the DOJ, Sally Yates, Dana Bente, and Rod Rosenstein each signed off on at least 1 application. We'll come back to Rosenstein in a moment. So the FBI used this unverified dossier to obtain FISA warrants against a member of Trump's campaign. By obtaining this warrant, the FBI could tap into any communication of Page, email, phone call, text message, and that means the FBI could be picking up conversations with other members of Trump's campaign. And that was the purpose of the whole thing. Now, FBI rules say that information in FISA applications should be accurate and verified, but the dossier was not verified. The FBI attempted to corroborate the dossier by referring to information in a Yahoo News story that contained the same information as that in the dossier. But the source for the Yahoo News story and the dossier was the same person, Christopher Steele. In fact, once the FBI was aware he was talking to the media, he was fired as an informant. But the FBI still found him to be credible up until that point, and thus the dossier was deemed to be credible. But we know the FBI withheld information from the FISA court including that the source of the funding of the dossier was the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign. In other words, the dossier was produced for one campaign in the hopes of getting oppositional research on the other campaign. No judge would have issued a warrant knowing this information. But we know that at least one FISA court judge was corrupted by the FBI. Peter Strzok was in communication with Rudolph Contreras. He was the judge in the Michael Flynn case. Flynn pled guilty before this judge on December 1, 2017, and the judge recused himself from the case on December 7th. This in light of the first news reports on December 2nd of text messages existing between Strzok and Page. Did Judge Contreras feel text messages might include discussions of him and Strzok talking to each other? Now, we don't know if Contreras was one of the judges who authorized one of the warrants against Carter Page, but the idea that a member of the FBI was in communication with a FISA court judge and the FBI went to the court 4 separate times to get warrants on Carter Page means the level of corruption here is astronomical. But there are more people involved in the dossier. One of the women who worked at Fusion GPS was Nellie Ohr. Her husband was Associate Deputy Attorney General at the time. His name is Bruce Ohr. Nellie Ohr gave her husband information on Trump that he later turned over to the FBI. We know that top officials in the intelligence community was leaking the dossier. John Brennan, former CIA director, leaked the dossier to Democrats on Capitol Hill. James Clapper, former director of national intelligence, leaked the dossier to CNN, the first media outlet to report on the dossier. And besides Christopher Steele doing his own digging, people were feeding him unsolicited information that he used to write a second dossier. That information came by way of the State Department. A close ally of Bill Clinton, Cody Shear, gave information to Sidney Blumenthal, a close friend of both Bill and Hillary Clinton. Sidney Blumenthal gave the information to John Weiner, who gave it to Steele, who gave it to the FBI. So in just these 3 scandals, the Clinton email scandal, the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation, and the dossier, look at all the different people involved. Look at all the unethical and illegal activity that took place. And I haven't even gotten to the special counsel case yet. So Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein appointed Robert Mueller, former FBI director, to be the special counsel to investigate Trump for possible collusion with Russia. Rosenstein came out weeks ago with an indictment from the special counsel against Russians and Russian entities, but did not implicate any American for knowingly participating with Russians in election interference. In other words, there was no collusion by any American. And yet, the special counsel investigation continues. This investigation has gone so far from Trump-Russia collusion, looking into the past of Paul Manafort and bringing up process crimes against people involved in the investigation, including Michael Flynn. Robert Mueller's team is full of biased people. There are at least 7 prosecutors on the team who have donated to Democratic candidates in the past, including Hillary Clinton. Peter Strzok, who clearly was biased toward Clinton being president, was asked by Mueller to join the team. He was booted off the team after his anti-Trump text messages were discovered. And this discovery occurred months before any of those text messages became public. Strzok was hesitant to join the team because he said there was no there there. And indeed, there is no there there because there is no collusion. Andrew Weissmann is on the special counsel team, and he has a shady past, using unethical tactics to secure convictions. In fact, he came close to having his law license taken away from him due to his actions in an organized crime case in New York in 1997. In this case, Weissmann withheld from the defense that a witness in the case was actually an FBI informant who himself was involved in many murders stemming from organized crime. The Supreme Court unanimously overturned an obstruction of justice conviction secured by Weissmann against accounting firm Arthur Andersen. So it's clear the special counsel team is biased, and with people like Weissmann on the team, will staunchly go after people in order to secure convictions. And they would love to be able to indict the president. As to the role of congressional lawmakers in investigating all of this corruption at the FBI and DOJ, Rod Rosenstein has been stonewalling congressmen, preventing them from accessing key information they need to conduct their investigations. You might recall that in early January 2018, Rosenstein met with Speaker Paul Ryan after Rosenstein failed to produce documents for Devin Nunes related to the dossier. Rosenstein was being threatened with contempt of Congress. Rosenstein tried to plead with Ryan into letting him withhold the information, but the Speaker was not having any of it. More recently, Rosenstein would not allow congressional staffers to access unredacted text messages between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. They had to piece together partial text messages and discovered that Strzok wanted to meet with Judge Rudolph Contreras. And not only that, Strzok wanted to have a cocktail party as the setting to meet with the judge, and that he wanted to include people from work at the party as cover to avoid making it look like the judge would need to recuse himself. Now, why would Strzok be worried about that? We know Strzok was involved in both the Michael Flynn case. Strzok interviewed Flynn, and he was involved in the Trump investigation. He was head of counterintelligence. It certainly appears like Strzok was trying to fix the court. He knew this judge also sat on the FISA court, and Strzok would have known about the FBI applying for FISA warrants against Carter Page. So he wanted to meet with the judge and described a cocktail party as a way to provide cover. Absolutely amazing. If it turns out this judge signed off on one of the warrants, it means the Trump case is tainted in addition to the Flynn case. But what explains why Rod Rosenstein is stonewalling? Well, recall from the Nunes memo that his signature appears on at least one FISA application. And this is pretty lousy if you ask me. Trump appoints Rosenstein to be his deputy attorney general, and then he goes and authorizes a FISA application to spy on someone involved in Trump's campaign. Rosenstein is afraid lawmakers will uncover the role he has played in all of this. Who knows? There may even be text messages discussing Rosenstein. The last text message is from Lisa Page to Peter Strzok, in which she tells him on June 23, 2017, not to ever text her again. Rod Rosenstein became the Deputy Attorney General on April 26, 2017, about 2 months prior. And seeing as how Rosenstein appointed the special counsel and the disdain Strzok and Page had for Trump, I'm sure there are text messages between those two about Rosenstein. Of course, anyone who has their signature on the FISA applications, Comey, McCabe, Rosenstein, Sally Yates, and Dana Bente, surely had to be committing a crime. Each of these individuals should have known the FISA applications were based largely on an unverified document and that key information was being withheld from the FISA court. This sounds to me like the warrants were fraudulently obtained. As lawmakers and real journalists continue to do their work, we will get closer to the truth. And I'm sure many people besides McCabe will be fired at the DOJ and FBI, and I'm sure many of these people will find themselves charged with crimes. Well, that does it for today, folks. There might be a podcast on Friday, so stay tuned for that. If there is a podcast on Friday, I'm going to get into the history of Robert Mueller. You'll definitely want to check that out. Have a great day, everybody.